You can, of course, go out and play cricket and bat without any protective equipment if you choose. Although you have to wear a helmet if you play for the England team. So if you want mobility, you can risk it with no pads. Obviously, makes the chance of being bowled a bit greater. Okay, so I'm last talk of this session, and my title of my talk is Potential Injury Burden in the Evolving Landscape of Franchise Cricket. That's a fairly long title someone gave me. And I'm not sure I'm going to solve anything for you here today, but I'm just going to try and give you some food of thought, or for us to think about in relation to the game. So when I first started in cricket, this is a characteristic picture. I would walk past Lords, not quite the sort of franchise cricket world that we find ourselves in now. And the reality is it's coming even to England now. So we've got the 100 franchise. And actually, this conference, we've always seen a great representation from franchises in a way that we didn't do even just 4 years ago at the last World Congress in Loughborough. So let's just try and review where we're moving forward with the game. So on the left, first IPL 2008, there were 84 games of franchise cricket. That was it around the world besides the domestic cricket. Underneath, 97 is the number of games that England played in that year, number of days of cricket. Move on 15 years, and it's 383 days of franchise cricket. And actually, we play a little bit more international cricket as well. So the world has changed remarkably in that period of time. If we look at the English summer, that was the preserve of our game. There was no encroachment on it. Our players didn't have any other opportunities. But now the IPL seeps straight into the very beginning of it. You've got the USA Major League cricket. You've got the 100 now we've had to shoehorn in. And so we have no international cricket in that period. We have the Lanka Premier League. I don't even know what the 60 is yet. And you've got the Caribbean Premier League at the end. So the reality is the opportunities to play outside of our international environment are increasing, and that's why we've just had to work out central contracts with extended periods now for 3 years for some of our players, and we've given central contracts out to 28 players because they can earn much more money playing in franchise cricket than they can playing for domestic international only. So a test specialist on the right will earn the majority of their income from the ECB, but actually that will start to become a fraction of the opportunities availed to them elsewhere. So franchise basically is here to stay, and players are going to be playing franchise cricket year-round because the money's there. At the same time, the international schedule is actually not getting any quieter. That's getting busier as well. So at the very top there, the T20, the ODI and the Test down the side, the yellow are the fixtures going forward in the year before, so it's just increasing and increasing the amount that we're being expected to play with an international side. So we've got centrally contracted players, 28 of them. If we look at the 15 that have been centrally contracted over the last few years, previously there have been incremental contracts as well. When they go and play in franchise cricket, not all go. So your Stuart Broads, Jimmy Andersons, don't get invited or stay at home, however you want to look at it. But about 60% of our players come and play in franchise cricket, and 40% of those that come and play abroad, wherever it might be, end up injured. So 1 in 2 or 3 of our players that come to play in franchise cricket get injured. Okay, so that might be not unexpected. Injuries are going to continue to occur around the world. And in reality, we talk about injury prevention all the time, but we're never going to prevent injuries. We're just going to reduce them. So don't expect anything, to change remarkably in this space. When we do lose a player to a franchise injury, they tend to be a little bit longer than our average. Our average injury is about 28 days, but the average injury we lose abroad, 38 days. No particular observable reason for that, but they just happen to be a little bit more severe. And interestingly, and I guess not unsurprising, but perhaps not sure what we're to expect on that, most of them are overuse fatigue injuries. And most commonly amongst that group are hamstrings, lumbar spine and shoulder. So acute trauma, we've heard about hands, we've heard about a number of injuries but actually our players who come abroad to franchise cricket, generally fatigue is the issue. If we then look at those that are injured, compared to time spent with England, they tend to have a higher injury rate when they play in franchise cricket. It's about 60% higher than the average rate we see in our game. And the 4 players that are most commonly injured in that group probably have a double rate of injury. So we know who our likely suspects are going to be, and when we send them abroad to play in franchise cricket, we release them on our NOCs, then, you know, we keep our fingers crossed, but we're expecting them to come back with an injury. And that actually, the franchise cricket world now accounts for nearly 20% of our total injuries in the group that go abroad and do get injured. Obviously, if they don't get injured, it doesn't account for anything. And no surprise, bowlers, all-rounders, and exposure to, you know, increased activity generally are the main predicament that we find ourselves in. So we're not immune to franchise cricket ourselves. We've got 100 competitions, men's and women's. It provides some great data that allows us to compare. We've got youngsters coming through quickly. So John Turner here, for instance, hadn't been playing professional cricket until this year. And we can see that when we compare it to our other formats, both for the men and the women, it's much higher than our T20 Blast, but just under our One Day Cup. So it's an injury burden, and it's not going anywhere. And we've already heard today some of the work that Amy done on analysis of the 100. So our total injuries are fairly predictable, high numbers. And I'm not really going to labour on these because these are fairly obvious, and we're all aware which parts of the body get injured and when they get injured. So the theme of the injury is the same across any franchise. So I'm just going to whiz through these. But I guess what we don't know is, just looking at that data for the 100, which I haven't shown you, but you'd seen before, actually in itself is unhelpful. What we're trying to understand is what the landscape looks like for all these franchises together, and actually what's happening to our franchisees and franchise players when they come back and play Test cricket, when they come back to domestic cricket, when they move from one tournament to the next. So what's the actual cumulative node look like? So if we go back and look at what our summer looks like, well, our players that do play for the England Test team but then disappear off and try and grab a bit of CPL, then take off into the ICC competitions, and then move on to the next competition, we know they're going to get injured. We know they're going to continue to get injured, and they're just going to continue to follow the money all year round. So when are they going to recover? So when we look at what happens to your mental health over a period of time, this is throughout a season. On the left in the blue, you can see generally your mood's up and down. It relates to form. Your well-being's up and down, but it's generally the trend is down, okay? Over time, until you have a break, your trend is down. The green line is the off-season, so those are the people that really need a break and they recover well, so when they stop playing cricket, their mental health recovers. And there are some people that actually can't cope without cricket. Cricket is their identification, so they slip into the bottom line. But in other words, with our franchise world, what's happening to our recovery period? So we've got our pillars of care in the ECB, and in the if you're moving from tournament to tournament, who's addressing all those factors? We heard just about helmets. You know, most of the things that we saw, the changes, the developments came from NGBs, investment in time and energy into British standards, working with helmet manufacturers for many, many years, PhDs. I'm not sure what's going to happen when we move to the franchise world and continue to try and prioritize spending, which will move towards players' salaries, and I'll show you an example of that in a second. Great, decision making around clinical care and precision around duty of care is based on good medical records, good medical sharing, multidisciplinary teams. So what's going to happen into these player records as we move between franchises and international and NGB and domestic? It's an interesting space. I'm not sure there's an obvious solution to that, because generally we've kept our injury records to ourselves. Will the players have their own injury record, a system? Will there be a universal one? I don't know yet. Now, some of the franchises that control a number of different clubs will obviously have an internal one between them, but the international, we all have different systems. I'm not sure what's happening there. Who's in charge of cardiac screening the players? So the players that arrive, do they have a cardiac passport? What's the set standard? Who designs and oversees this? You know, I think there's all sorts of areas that I could touch on. You know, we spent years developing Jimmy Anderson and Stuart Broad's footwear with Adidas. You know, that takes time, and that, you know, that requires people in the background dedicated to these programs. Skin cancer follows our teams because we spend our time in the sun around the world. Doesn't affect everyone, but we screen our players and we pick a skin cancer up every year. So is that our duty as the NGB to support these players? And then finally, when they hang their hat up, you know, who's going to look after them? Is it going to be the franchise? Is it going to be the NGB? Is it going to be the domestic team, the county regions? You know, the retired cricketer in our country has a PCA to look after them, a Players Association, but the reality is this could be the injury burden that's very different to our injury burden that we predictably think about. So, lastly, I'm just going to finish on a slide that illustrates what's going to happen to money. Okay, so if you look at this slide on the left, these are soccer teams or football teams in Europe. So in La Liga, League One, Serie A, even in the Premier League, the amount of money in the football is unbelievable. But don't believe that that money is going to come into duty of care, to science and medicine teams, and to welfare necessarily. It increasingly goes to the players. So the worst result, 95% of the money. In the Premier League, it's about 75%. So the reality is our players who are in these franchise competitions on the right, they're looking at these models. Don't believe me, they are looking at these, their agents are looking at these, and they're going to want a bigger slice of the pie. So the money's not going to come directly to us. So we're not going to solve the injury burden through the franchise monies as easily. We're going to have to work hard to extract great coordinated care across these players. So the future for these people is interesting, it's exciting. So someone like John Turner on the right, bowls 90 plus, you know, his first year in cricket, what's he going to do? Where's he going to go? You know, the opportunities, the monies that he's being offered are extraordinary, so he's going to follow the franchise well. But what will happen is he'll never play enough cricket to have hardened up and be prepared to play Test cricket. So he's making a choice early on that may preclude him from being fully developed to play cricket. So I've slightly overrun probably. Let's have a look. Yep, time's up. And I'm just going to leave you with the thought that we don't actually really know what the injury burden is. So the question was, what's the injury burden? Well, the answer is we don't know. How do we work together? That's going to be the secret. How do we create an environment that provides a safe mechanism for caring for our players, that creates a shared database and understanding? And, you know, the reality is it's an opportunity. So these guys, what are they going to choose to do? Franchise and earn millions, Test cricket. Who knows what the injury burden for any one of them will be, but we wish them luck. It's certainly a brave new world, and I haven't got the answer for you. Thank you.